make one singular question, and that will be the question that will let him finally rest in peace. But first, let's start talking about Toji Fushiguro and how we got there. Toji Fushiguro is one of the characters introduced in Jujutsu Kaisen, arguably around the time of hitting inventory, despite being teased around in other parts. To be precise, Toji Fushiguro had a condition called a heavenly restriction, which, in exchange of all his cursed energy, he will gain an extraordinary physical prowess. And in paper sounds a great trade. A lot of physical power in comparison to having no curse energy, practically being able to touch the short effect hit of domains expansions and other type of things. However, in practice, that would be a curse because in the clan he was born, after all, he would be actually Toji Senin. He was born in the Senin clan, which the Senin clan has been always known as the most vicious clan and cruel of them, because their philosophy would be, if you don't have cursed energy, you're absolutely trash. And this is generational. As I touched in my previous video of Maki, this is a generational trauma because all people that have been born into this specific clan has suffered of this. We have Maki and we have Toji and many other characters that probably could have suffered from this, yet not been touched in the whole manga or anime if you watch it. Sadly, this is something that not only was preventable, but this is something that was bound to happen because of this restriction. And he was never able to let it go because it was a systematic, traumatizing event that he will suffer because of his family. But for Toji Fushiguro, he's actually able to go past all the trauma that the Senin clan has inflicted in him. That being because he met his wife. Sadly, we don't have that much information about her when it comes to the manga itself, but it's known for a fact that Toji Fushiguro was able to leave behind the Senin clan, literally ditching his surname of Senin in exchange of his wife being Toji Fushiguro as we know him right now. And this is very important for him because this is the only and the first time that he has a value beyond all the sorcery community and the Senin clan. He has value beyond that. And this is a textbook example of how someone can recover from trauma and how heals through, because this is the only way that you can heal, replacing the trauma for good moments, good memories, and all of that. And he does. He makes progress. He leaves the Senin clan. He builds his family with his son and everything. But as usual in Jujutsu Kaisen, there's not that many happy endings, and everything will go crashing down after her death. Because after Megumi's birth, she died. Sadly, we don't have that much information, but this leads to a huge relapse. And sadly for him, her death is not an excuse or a trigger. After it was taken away from him, he goes back to the only thing that he had because he no longer has value. His value was his wife. And sadly, this is overdependence. He was entirely dependent on his wife. The moment that his wife was away, he couldn't be strong enough to protect his family because he wasn't able to do it because he depended fully. And I want to quote Goyo Saturn: "The worst curse is the curse of love." This is very important because he loved so much his wife that the moment that he lost her, he lost his life. He became a puppet, a hollow, became hollow, and it's sad to see. And this relapse is not a failure on him, but is when your pillar falls, when you don't have anything going, because the only North Star just vanished. And a very interesting point, and not many people bring it up, but is how Gege utilizes gambling as an engine to portray ideas. In Toji's case, gambling becomes a ludopathy, which is the compulsive gambling disorder. At the end of the day, after losing his wife, he loses himself in the bets and betting and betting and just taking jobs so he can bet any more. A point that he loses sight of everything. And this is not something that could be seen as thematic and simply for sake of being thematic. Like example, Hakari, that you can make an argument that the gambling aspect of him is unnecessary and can be anything else. But in the case of Toji Fushiguro, this is a very important self-destruction mechanism that he has because he no longer wants to leave, but he doesn't want to precisely like, oh, I have the desire to inherently zero myself to say I don't want to get censored. But it's so cruel, this ludopathy that he saw at the point that he sells his own son, Megumi, which he named as his little miracle. He sells it to the Sennin clan because he has hope that maybe will not be as bad as it was for him. But it's so cruel because it's making the same cycle that he was barely able to escape. And it's sad because he practically inflicts the generational trauma that this sinning clan gave it to him. He became what he swore to destroy in a positive way because he tried to be a caring father, as a loving husband, but he became a hollow monster that doesn't care anything else besides the money that he can use to feed this addiction that he has on the Ludo. And this trauma that he holds is what makes him arguably the most tragic character because not only is the trauma eating him, but also it becomes the philosophy for what he lives because he detaches from everything. He holds value for nothing besides the gambling. Gambling becomes his identity because he believes his value is in the game. Let's now go to the point where we get introduced to him fully, the hidden inventory arc, where we see him as an antagonistic force that we present. We fear because he's methodical. He doesn't have care for anything. He's detached fully. He's a stone cold killer. And arguably, we always expect to see, oh, the antagonist will fail the purpose that he's pointing out. Mind you, this is before the Shibuya incident, and this is the only moment that we see the villain actually succeeding with his mission because he takes the job to kill the star plasma vessel and he kills it. He fully succeeds in the mission and nearly kills both Satoru Gojo, which sadly is a pre-awakened one, and also Geto. More on that later. And we see him that he's a force to reckon, arguably one of the strongest, and actually a representation of one of the strongest ones. Similar to how we have Gojo Satoru as the strongest of the modern history, Yuji Itadori as the strongest sorcerer in the future, and Sukuna as the strongest sorcerer in history. But Toji Fushiguro, we could argue he's the strongest heavenly restriction user because he's able to utilize it fully. But everything goes downhill from here because Gojo Satoru would fully awake. He would become and reach arguably his peak with reverse curse technique and access to his full inventory on the limitless, which is red and purple. And sadly, despite him sensing everything was wrong, he decides to face it. Not because he can actually believe he can win. He's not entirely sure. That's why he has unease. But instead, he faces it because he wants to prove everyone wrong. He wants to destroy the pinnacle of Jujutsu. This is the moment where he wanted to become the strongest one. He killed the strongest one with all his planning and everything. And it's his pride because at the end of the day, he never healed his pain of being treated as nothing. He tries to search his value as a machine to kill the source because he reverses such trauma to become this. Sadly, he loses this fight, and we know that he dies. But in those last moments, he remembers his son, and in an attempt to try to actually save and break the cycle, he tells Gojo about his son. He talks about him and how he's going to get sold to the Sennin clan. But he can make an option. He can save it and actually break the cycle that he made again. And now we come to the most important part of this video. The Shibuya arc. Arguably, as I always say, the most important arc in the whole Jujutsu Kaisen series. And for Toji's case, he gets resurrected through Granny Sogami's sentence. Her curse technique was able to bring at least part of Toji Fushiguro, which was his body. Because you have to remember that his body is quite special because he suffers a heavenly restriction, and his body is actually probably the strongest without any curse energy, mind you. But because of such strength, his body also carries his soul, and the curse technique goes wrong. After all, Shibuya incident is what if everything went for everyone, and for Granny Ogami case, it goes insanely wrong because the moment that they summon the information of the body of Toji Fushiguro, the body overrides the soul, and it comes to very weird things because since the body of Toji Fushiguro does not consume absolutely no curse energy and he kills Granny Ogami, he practically becomes fully resurrected, but as a puppet of carnage because he no longer has his consciousness controlling him. He's just killing the strongest sorcerer that he encounters. And he actually does. He encounters multiple sorcerers fighting the special great curse dagger. And he alone practically is able to destroy it with such ease while using the curse tool Playful Cloud, which takes advantage of how strong his body was, and he's able to do it. After killing Dagon, he bears his fangs, his strength towards the next strongest sorcerer, and despite having multiple grade 1 sorcerers like the leader of the Sennin clan and Nanami, he decides to go towards Megumi and try to attack. And in that midst of rage and or the order of the sorcerer that resurrected him, he goes for his son in a very tragic moment, practically trying to kill his own son. But people, this is where we come from the beginning, and he, in a moment of agency and lucidness, he makes the question, what is your name? When Megumi answers Megumi Fushiguro, Sennin would actually ask him, not Sennin? This single answer would actually be the confirmation that he was able to finally break the cycle. His son was no longer part of the clan. While yes, he had ties with it because at the end of the day was his family, he wasn't bound fully by the Sennin clan and practically indoctrinated in the ideals of the Sennin clan. Instead, he was able to rise and grow as the kid that he was supposed to be, with the help of Goyo Satoru, of course. And this is not something because we don't see a full redemption for him. At the end of the day, this is a moment that Toji Fushiguro can rest, and after literally zeroing himself, he's able to let go of everything, not as a redemption, not as an atonement, but simply accepting that everything what happened was for something.